Rania Sabah is one person who decided that it wasn't enough to watch the war in Syria unfold online. She lives in Dallas now, but Rania was born and raised in Syria, and she decided to go back to see for herself. It was pretty risky. She couldn't contact family members who are still in Syria for fear of causing trouble for them, so she found another expatriate who said he'd take her in. And that's what they did, crossing into northern Syria, heading towards the town of Edlib, across the border with Turkey.
We had to sneak across the border, and we actually got shot at. I mean, they missed, but we got shot at. It was a very dangerous, situation we went through.
Who's the we? Who were you traveling with?
I was traveling with a friend that I have. We've been communicating mainly through Facebook and phone and Skype and just trying to coordinate this. The reason I picked him is because he is from a village inside Jabal Alzawya in Edlib, and he knows the area. He knows the Free Syrian Army members there. He knows the civilians who've been hurt. So he was like my guide, if you will. After we crossed the border, we got to meet a few men from the Free Syrian Army, and we were in their protection.
So back me up a little bit here. You said you got shot at. Tell me about the shooting. What happened?
What happened is that, we're sneaking across the border, so we're not doing things legally because we cannot do them legally.
Right, so you're on the road or you're in the desert?
On foot.
Yeah.
We're on foot at that point, and we're just across, we're just going across the border when a Turkish soldier, he instead of shooting in the air, because they're used to people crossing the border by this time, but instead of shooting in the air, he shot across. And he was terrified. He thought we were journalists, and he had to see my camera and my computer and everything. And at the time, there was nothing in it because we were just going in.
Right.
So he let us through, but, it was a very, very scary experience because he shot several times, and we had to be on the ground, and it was a very scary experience.
You must have been thinking at that point, maybe this isn't such a good idea.
No, not at all. In fact, I cherish that experience because I want to know what it feels like to be in Syria. In fact, I still consider it a very, very, lucky and easy thing to go through, considering that this man really did not intend to kill us. He was just trying to scare us. But in Syria, the snipers do intend to kill. I mean, they shoot to kill. They don't shoot to just scare people off.
So how close did you get to the area of conflict between the Free Syrian Army, the rebels, and the Assad regime?
I was in the middle of it. In fact, the shelling, I stayed there for 8 days, and the shelling would not stop night and day. It was, you look up in the sky and you see a bomb falling nearby. And in fact, the scariest experience I've been through was watching a MiG-23 circle over the village we were in, to the point where you could see it so vividly. I was holding a camera, and I just could not record anything. They were asking me to take shelter. And I said, I don't think it matters at this point, because, when you get a rocket launched at you from a MiG-23, I don't think you're going to survive, regardless what floor you're on.
Rania Sabah made time to meet with the children who are caught up in this war, and she also spent time with the rebel soldiers. I'll continue my conversation with her in just a moment. I'm Dick Gordon from APM, American Public Media. This is The Story. I'm Dick Gordon. This is The Story. I'm talking with Rania Sabah. She's a woman from North Dallas who left her young daughter to go to Syria to see for herself what's happening there. She was telling me what it's like to be on the ground when one of the government's MiG fighters is circling above.
They were asking me to take shelter, and I said, I don't think it matters at this point, because, when you get a rocket launched at you from a MiG-23, I don't think you're going to survive, regardless what floor you're on. And it did actually, dip, and then it launched a rocket, and I think it dropped it about less than 1 kilometer away from where we were. the mere experience of the children screaming and running around frantically was just horrendous. Being there, I bonded with people that I stayed with, especially the children, and a 5-year-old child was able to tell me whether a missile, when it's first launched, it makes a noise, and then when it hits, it makes another noise again. And a 5-year-old child is so used to it that he was able to tell me whether to take shelter or not based on how close the first explosion is.
Rania, let me stop you for half a second here.
Sure.
What was your plan once you were there? Was it to take pictures or to meet people? I'm not clear.
I went there with a video camera, really, and a camera, and I just wanted to record interviews with different people. It could be people from the Free Syrian Army, or people from just every walk of life, like the widows and the orphans, and just normal people that survived, for example, being detained, and just hear about their experiences. And at the time, it was a holiday for Muslims, so it was a time where I just felt like if all I can do during my trip is just to give a hug to a small child who's lost his father and just tell him that we're thinking about him and we're there to support him, to me, that was a successful trip.
And did you feel like you made a difference to the people there by going? I mean, they would know that you're living in the U.S. and that you've gone to some personal risk to come there. You weren't bringing them food or arms or anything like that. You were coming, in effect, I guess, just to be a witness and to say, hey, there's people who are paying attention, and I'm one of them. Did that make a difference to the people you met?
I think it did. I think, the way I know it did is that when we were leaving, we attempted to leave 3 times and we couldn't because the road outside Syria was not safe, because of the shelling. But every time we pack and try to leave, I see tears in their eyes. They're giving me a hug like they've known me for their entire lives. And I felt the same way, too. It was very heartbreaking to leave them. And the fact that they worried about me so much, they wanted me to come back to my daughter. And here I am. I have tears in my eyes looking back at them, like thinking, what about you, And that was how I knew that it mattered to them, that somebody cared enough to leave their home and leave their family and come to see them.
Did anybody say to you, we have to be here, we don't have a choice, you don't have to be here, you could be back in North Dallas with your little girl, what are you doing here? They did say that, they did, and but they also knew exactly why I was there. They knew exactly that, there is a misconception about people in the Middle East in general, in the West. And they knew that the reason I was there is try to bridge the gap between the 2 cultures and the 2 nations and try to, speak from what people are thinking, not from what politicians are saying, because they're 2 different things. Did you get a chance to meet any of the soldiers?
I did. I met with colonels who were defected. I met with soldiers, and I also met with civilians who joined the Free Syrian Army, and some of them actually ended up being leaders of battalions.
And were you asking them questions about why they're doing it or what their motivation is? You know that there are a lot of different things being said about people who are there, that some are there because they are Islamists and they feel like the country will become a little bit more religious if they get rid of the regime, and other people are defectors from the army, that it's kind of a mix. What did you find?
When I met with, especially with the leaders, the colonels, one of them, his name is Arafat Hamoud, I was very relieved to see the open-mindedness and how they commented on issues anywhere from sectarianism to Assad to even Israel. And what impressed me is that when I asked them about the sectarian questions, I wanted to probe those things. I wanted to see if it's going to turn into hatred for all Alawites, etc. And his response was it's not about sectarian difference. Now, granted, the regime is trying to feed the minorities fear of the majority, fear
Right.
that this is going to turn into another, Muslim Brotherhood-run country, and you're going to lose your rights.
But you know your way
people,
around, Rania. Did you challenge any of the young men, the young soldiers with beards, saying, what's in this for you? What's your plan?
I did, actually, and I asked them flat out, because I'll be honest with you, I went there, I don't wear the traditional headscarf, but I went there taking one with me in my backpack just in case I felt it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be disrespectful to them, So I went there and thinking, if I had to wear it, I will. But meeting those guys, initially, everybody had a beard, and traditionally, this is a sign of a religious group. And I was a little intimidated at first. But then once I sat with them, and we spent pretty much days together. But immediately once I start talking to them, they were very open-minded. They were very friendly. They would, if I was in a place where, I'm going to trip, they would hold my hand. And I was really surprised. So eventually I had to ask, what's up with the beard? Like, why does everybody have a beard? You guys don't seem like you're Salafis. You're smoking cigarettes, for God's sake. Salafis don't smoke. And they laughed a lot about, these questions. And they told me several reasons. Some of them are as simple as you cannot try to groom yourself and look good when your next door neighbor had just lost 2 sons. So that's one simple explanation. The other, which were a little bit worrying for me, is that they are getting help from religious groups outside Syria. And their way to show their gratitude is to grow a beard. And I felt, this is going to turn Syria into something that it's not. It's going to turn the revolution into something that it's not. And that's why I felt, I saw the importance of me going there, because I wanted to give that message. If we wait too long and we allow this conflict to continue, it's not going to turn out to be a good revolution. It's not going to turn out to be good for the whole world, for the whole region, not just for Syrians.
Rania Sabah lives in Dallas. She says she watched the news of the war in Syria for a year and a half and wanted to see for herself how bad it was. You're listening to the story. When she made her way across the border earlier this year, she says she spent time with soldiers and families. Rania Sabah was particularly drawn to the children.
One child, he was about 11 years old, and he was handicapped. So he had a hard time expressing himself. But the look in his eyes, the sorrow that I saw, the anger in his voice was just so clear that even if you don't speak the language, you would get it. He escaped one neighborhood in Homs, which it was bombarded by the Syrian regime, and they moved into another one. And they didn't succeed. They were bombarded again, so they had to move one more time. And at that point, they were moving to northern Syria. On their way there, they stopped at a checkpoint that is, ran by the Syrian regime. And the guards saw that it's a car of, a family. There were 5 children, a man and his wife. And after they let them through, they decided to shoot at the car. And as a result, his father died in front of his eyes. And, he told me how he woke up just seeing his father bleeding in front of his eyes. And I told him, what do you want to do to Bashar al-Assad? And he said, I want to grow up and buy a gun and shoot him 100 times. And, this child is so angry. He is so frustrated that he's thinking of revenge. You can't blame them. You can't blame them for the hate they feel.
But if there's that much hatred there, Rania, that doesn't bode well for the future of the country, no matter who prevails, the regime or the rebels.
When you ask them who did this, they say that it's people from their regime. It's not necessarily a particular sect. So as tough as this is, but I'm glad this is how they answer it, because the last thing I want to hear is that an Alawi did this versus somebody from the Syrian regime did this. So, yes, I'm not going to lie to you. The the majority of the people in the army who are committing those horrendous crimes, especially the torture, happen to belong to one particular sect because they feel like they have to survive and this is how they're going to exist. But not to exclude the Sunnis and others either. So when a soldier in the Syrian army is put in a situation where you either kill or be killed, he really does not have a choice. And one thing that a lot of people, I think, fail to mention is that no matter who's dying on what side, at the end of the day, it's Syrian people that are dying for a dictator. So whether you're dying, you're defending the revolution and defending civilians, or whether you're on the regime side and you're defending Assad, at the end of the day, those, in my opinion, are all victims of this dictator that's just using people against each other so he can remain in power.
Rania, when it came time for you to leave, was it difficult to leave?
It was. It was very difficult. And I actually said it so many times, if it wasn't for my young daughter and I knew how much she needs me at this age, I'll probably not come back.
If you'd stayed, what would you have done? Would you have picked up a gun?
There are so many other things I could do, but if I had to, yes, I will.
Yeah. And physically, was it difficult to get out of the country? I mean, was that dangerous?
It was. I mean, it's a long walk in the wilderness, and when we got out at night. So it's very dangerous. I mean, you're walking in the wilderness pretty much, and it is dangerous. But I think on the way back, since we got shot at when we first came in, on the way out, we tried to arrange it better with other people, and we had to spend some money to make sure that, we're going to be in good hands and the Turks are not going to give us a hard time.
So it's been some weeks since you came back from Syria. I'm curious to know what your perspective is now. Because, of course, since you've come back, Rania, most of the news has been about politics and the election here, as it normally is, in the weeks prior to a presidential election. But, even with the foreign policy debate, there wasn't a lot of talk about Syria. There's not a lot of reporting about Syria on the radio or in the newspapers, on television. What's that like for you?
It was very frustrating, to be honest with you. It's a huge letdown. I've been thinking about this trip for over a year, not just trying to plan it, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for the right people to trust enough that I would go in with them. So to come back and realize that it all happened at the wrong time, because there are more relevant news to people in the U.S. now, given the elections than the situation in Syria. It was a huge letdown. Mm-hmm. But the reason I feel let down is because I wanted the people here to hear the voices of people over there, to hear that they're not asking for military intervention. They're not asking for boots on the ground. I feel like it's a shame, because we are the country that is a beacon for democracy and freedom. And this is how I grew up believing that America is, even though I grew up in Syria. But my belief was that the American values are the values that I respect, of respecting human rights. And
so if you had 15 seconds to speak to them and make one point, what would you say?
Protect American strategic interests. Do not turn Syria into an Afghanistan in a region that is so volatile. Letting the situation go in Syria the way it has been will only backfire on American self-interest in the region and will affect the entire region. But even you're doing the same thing. You're saying the only way you can get their attention is to say this is in America's self-interest. Like it wouldn't ever be done in the interests of the people there, the people you met. Yeah. It won't be. And I understand that. But at the same time, unfortunately, we've seen it in Kosovo. President Clinton, he said that one of his biggest regrets is waiting 3.5 years before taking action. So it's not new that people don't act, or, leaders of the free world don't act just based on humanitarian, needs. They have to act based on strategic interests. And we hear them saying this over and over and over, that I feel like, okay, but I still feel like it's not in our best interest to ignore the situation there. You have Turkey, Saudi, Israel, Iraq. It's a very volatile region. ignoring the situation and sweeping it under the rug will only make it worse.
And Rania, what did you tell your daughter when you came home? Did you tell her where you'd been, what you'd done?
She's a little too young to understand that.
No,
but
2.5, but she noticed that you were gone.
She noticed, and it was heartbreaking because when I was there was no electricity, there was no food, there was no communication, no internet, nothing. So I was really, we had a satellite phone, which I used once because they only use it for emergency, reasons, to just let my family know that I'm fine. And so it was very, very heartbreaking for her because we're very attached. At 2.5, she's very depending on me, and it was very tough for me to leave her. But the reason I did it is because of Hamza al-Khatib, of Tamer al-Sharai, all those children that have died. And I think of their moms. I think of the pain they went through, and there were nights I couldn't sleep, thinking of how would these mothers feel when the whole world has just turned their backs on them.
Rania Sabah joined me from Dallas. We've got links to her videos from Syria. You can find those on our website at thestory.org.